The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. The Prime Minister could have followed our common sense plan to fix the budget, stop crime, and so on, but instead he decided to waste $60 million when Canadians can't afford food or rent. And this was a scandal, the ArriveCan app that we didn't even need, which falsely sent 10,000 people into quarantine and enriched Liberal cronies. Isn't it true that that app was not worth the cost, just like the Liberal government is not worth the cost? The Honourable Prime Minister. The Honourable Minister, rather. Mr. Speaker, we've read the Auditor General's report. We've accepted her recommendations. The only thing I agree with my colleague opposite on is that anyone responsible for managing taxpayer money must follow strict rules. The rules in this case were not followed. We accept the recommendations to make sure this never happens again. And Mr. Speaker, we will always remain responsible when it comes to taxpayer money. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. So he's going to punish those responsible for this scandal? It should start with the Prime Minister himself. He should have had the courage to stand and defend himself rather than hiding behind another. This was an app we didn't need. It forced 10,000 people into quarantine when they shouldn't have. It enriched contractors who did nothing. They did no work and simply offered members of the Liberal government whiskey. That's simply not worth the cost. Before we hear the answer, I just ask everyone to please remain a bit more quiet so that the Speaker can hear the questions and the answers. The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and we thank the Auditor General who we are in favor of her recommendations around ArriveCan. Many of these recommendations have already been implemented. Others will be shortly, including new measures to guarantee that deliverables are clearly identified in procurement contracts. We will continue to ensure that contracts awarded by our government are done so in a responsible, open way.
Crisis of doubling housing costs and 22 million people forced to food banks, the Prime Minister could have followed our common sense plan to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime. Instead, he blew over $60 million on an ArriveCan app that we didn't need, didn't work, sent 10,000 people erroneously into quarantine, losing income, all the while the thing costed 750 times more than the Prime Minister promised. Won't he stand up today and admit that the app is just like him? It's not worth the cost, it's not worth the corruption.
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition knows very well that the moment there were allegations around cost overruns or inappropriate contracting practices, the Canadian Border Services Agency immediately began an internal audit and made the appropriate referrals to the appropriate authorities. We take the obligation to manage taxpayers' money very seriously. Under no circumstances would we condone what the Auditor General determined to be contracting practices that did not follow the rules, and anybody who didn't will be held to account.
Absolutely. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Well, if he wants to hold someone to account for the ArriveCan, why not hold the one person who had the authority to create the ArriveCan and who had the authority to stop the ArriveCan, and that's the Prime Minister of Canada. He is the government. This was a government program we warned wasn't needed, wouldn't work, and now we know it went 750 times over budget. 75% of the contractors did no work at all, but they did buy whiskey and other treats for the top Liberal government officials. Again, won't the Prime Minister admit the app is just like him? Not worth the cost, not worth the corruption.
The Honourable Minister for Public Services.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As my colleague from Public Safety said earlier, we would like to thank the Auditor General and welcome her recommendations on the ArriveCan application. Some of that report recommendations have already been implemented, some will soon be implemented, including the introduction of new measures to ensure that tasks and deliverables are clearly defined in future professional services contracts. We are committed to continuing to ensure that contracts are delivered in a fair, efficient, and transparent manner.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
And again, the Prime Minister is hiding under a rock, refusing to stand up and explain himself after he blew $60 million on this Arrive scam while Canadians cannot afford to eat, heat, or house themselves. This scam involved taking money that could be used for border security, like scanning the 99% of shipping containers that go without any inspection from our ports with stolen cars, not to mention other things that Canadians could have done with that money. Instead, it stuffed the pockets of 75% of the contractors who did no work. Again, will the Prime Minister admit that the Arrive scam is not worth the cost and not worth the corruption?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I'm surprised that the Leader of the Opposition would mention investing in border security when his government cut 1,000 officers that did the exact kind of work that he's now pretending he wants to invest in. When they eliminated 50% of the intelligence capacity in the Border Services Agency to work with local, provincial police and the RCMP. So, Mr. Speaker, we have no lessons to take in investing in border security from somebody who gutted the Border Services Agency.